Hi there. Welcome to Tech Talk Weekly. I'm Bob from Creation Station. Seriously, this is the real one this time. If you were tuning in before, we did a guest practice session as we were teaching a class on how to do podcasts here at Palm Beach State College. Today's episode, as always, is about 20 minutes long. We're going to give you 3 or 4 interesting stories. My guest today doesn't believe the first story is even interesting, so we're going to test that theory out. If you've got a story for us, Creation Station at Broward.org. How are you doing today, Miss Karina?
I'm doing good.
So you're out at South Regional Library Creation Station. Karina here gets to wrap up our Women's History Month and Creation Station Month all at once for us. So thank you very much for doing it. Tell us what you do out there at South Regional Library.
So I'm a supervisor at the Circulation Department here in South Regional, and I help out with the Creation Station. Yeah, that's about it.
What kind of stuff have you been doing out there with Creation Station?
Well, we recently just finished taking pictures for an Easter green screen project, and it was actually very successful, and we had a lot of positive reviews about it.
That's excellent.
Yes.
And with the green screen, did you dress them up as rabbits or eggs, or what did you dress them up as?
Some people came in dressed as bunny rabbits, like they had the little ears and everything.
Nice.
And then we would put their image onto a background that had like a bunch of rabbits and eggs and things like that, and they loved it.
Cool. Put them inside of the Easter basket. That's not a bad idea. That's fun. Yeah. See all the cool stuff that happens in libraries, people? Come on now. Okay, so Karina and I are different on this first article, as I said. So, helium, it's more than just making funny noises, people. Helium is actually a really serious problem for the world. Now tell me, Karina, you saw this article and you said it in the pre-show, like, this is a boring one.
It was a little bit boring. I understand the importance of it because I used to work at Party City and there was shortages on helium, if you can believe it. And so in my head at the time, I was like, how can that be important? Like, where would the helium be going? Because all I remember from helium is like balloons and things like that. Mm-hmm. And, people inhaling them and making the strange noises. But I also learned from the article that helium is used for a lot of different things, like, what was it, MRIs?
Yep, MRI machines and all sorts of stuff that is out there, lasers, and a lot of different things that depend on helium as an inert gas that can be there for people to be able to have access to. And we are running out. There's only so much helium left in the world. And part of the problem is it was created at the beginning of the planet and it condenses down. And when you find it, most of the time we only find it as a byproduct of natural gas or something like that, which is why this reservoir in Minnesota is so crazy. It sat there and just helium slowly concentrating in this one area that they're going to be able to do. And the concentrations are 13.8% of the gases there are helium. And I know most people out there are thinking, 13%, that's not that high, Bob. What are you talking about? Did you see that number there, Karina, in the article? Normally, the actual ratio of helium is 0.3.
Yes, that's a big difference.
Yeah.
That's like 13 times the average.
So this is going to, again, weirdly put the United States in charge of one of the top resources going forward in the future, because this is the largest space open and out there for people.
I didn't think of it that way, honestly.
Yeah.
I did not think about that.
This is like the people who are looking at lithium mines and who can control that. The United States in the near future is going to be controlling the helium supply for the planet.
Oh, wow.
More
and
specifically,
that's going to open up a lot of doors.
Yeah. Yep. And opening up a lot of doors. And speaking of batteries and lithium and everything like that, out in China, they have got an amazing, I wish I had this here. I drive an electric car. I charge like at home, just plugging into the wall. China's doing us way better on this. You drive into this little garage. The car battery pops out from the bottom. They stick a new battery up inside, plug it in, and you drive off less than 5 minutes, and you go from 0 to full charge, and you're back on the road.
Yeah, see, I don't know how I like this one so much because it's like, what do they do with the batteries afterwards?
They recharge them.
So to me, it's like, those remote control cars we had when we were little that you had to change the batteries all the time. It's just like, okay, but what happens if you can't recharge them anymore? Like,
so actually what happens, depending upon the company and who makes them, for Nissan, their electric cars, when the battery's not good enough to drive your car, they take it out of your car, give you a new one, and then they take those batteries and put them in their factories to run their robots.
oh, okay.
And
So it's
then
not
when
too
they
much of a
wear
weight.
out from the robots, then they mount them on the wall to charge tools and phones and things like that until they're totally depleted and can't be recharged anymore at all.
Okay, so it's not like a environment issue if they try to dispose of this. Okay.
Yeah, no, and actually that's a really good point, because if you need to have a way of disposing of these things properly and making sure that nobody else out there in the world is going to be impacted. Cue our next story. By having all this electronic waste. This is why we've talked about it on the show before. Go to your hazardous waste material sites to return your batteries, your phones, your miscellaneous pieces like that, so that it doesn't end up in the regular trash streams and gets things polluted.
If that's the case, it's kind of sad that's only going to be so far in China because apparently
Yeah.
in Europe it's not too popular.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why, and this is why we don't have any at all in the United States, is because you have to have a standard that all of your car companies will match and meet, and all use the same battery and the same thing. And in the United States, every car company is in competition. Ford, GM, etc., Tesla, all make their own batteries and have their own type of connections and their own configurations, rather than what China has mandated for their electric car companies, that you will have this kind of thing and everybody can just plug and play.
Yeah. The other thing I noticed is that in the first line, it mentions that he drove 6 hours.
Yeah.
And I was like, so the battery doesn't last very long.
No, it depends on how far and fast you're driving. Most of the electric cars in China and the rest of the world, they're not as worried about range as we are here in the United States.
True.
I mean, my Bolt, I've got a Chevy Bolt, and it gets a 300-mile range, which is plenty to drive, a long time around here in South Florida. I'm not going to drive to, New York in it in one day, but that's also way more than 6 hours, obviously.
Yeah.
Although if I was going to drive to New York, I'd really like to have that battery swap.
Yes. It's 5 minutes.
Yeah. It is not a bad little thing. But not everybody's careful with their batteries.
That was my other thing. I know flooding and things like that, any natural disasters, it can ruin batteries.
Yeah. And you're supposed to dispose of things properly.
Yes.
And apparently NASA had a mistake disposing of some batteries from the space station.
Yeah. My question is,
there's a lot of questions.
When did they toss it out of the space station that it finally landed in Florida?
Yeah.
Because it says that it was like a 2-ton pallet or something like that.
Yeah.
And then by the time it crashed through the roof, it was 2 pounds?
Mm-hmm. So what happened is 3 years ago, here's a great picture of the actual pallet of batteries right here. It's all wrapped up. It's all nice and clean. And it's supposed to go on a nice long orbit around the planet and just slowly but surely degrade in orbit as it falls back to Earth. And by the time it comes to Earth, it is supposed to have been totally burned up, no waste, no anything like that. That's the intention. That's how most satellites come back to Earth, is because they stop working, and they also send them down that way so that it will burn up in the atmosphere and not cause any issues.
A natural incinerator.
Exactly. Very good. Yes, 100%. But turns out something went wrong with this package, and it broke apart during its re-entry At least that is a current thought process. Remember, this happened 3 years ago that they let this pallet go, and it was just at the beginning of March that this actually hit the ground. So it took a long time for this to happen. It just so happens for us, it was in Naples, Florida, on the West Coast.
Yes.
And I'm looking to see if I can find a picture of that battery chunk.
I don't think I saw
Here it is.
Oh, there it
There's
is.
the battery chunk right here. So you can see it's not that big overall, but notice it went through 2 floors.
Yes.
and
And
hit
what
the
happens if
floor.
someone was standing underneath that?
Yes, 100%.
Like, that's very unsafe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so part of the problem was it was supposed to impact in the ocean, in the Atlantic Ocean, and it didn't. It hit on the west coast of Florida. So it was off a little bit in the window and a little bit northern in the window.
So someone didn't do their math correctly.
Yeah, or it's probably like within the margin of error or just outside of it, because I mean it's a big planet. It's pretty hard to hit things. Actually, it would be really hard to plan to make this happen. So,
Yeah.
but yeah. And you can look at it. You can see the size here, just next to a thing. It's not that big. It's just a lot. It's heavy. Survived and went through the roof because of the speed, just like any meteor or anything like that. Comes smashing right through your roof and doing that.
Now, my other question is,
Yeah.
is it still hazardous?
No.
It's not.
Once it cools down, it's not hazardous.
Okay. Because I'm like, it's still a battery, and like I know those chemicals and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
no, that's a really good question, Karina, because what happens is the heat from re-entry fuses it together.
Sort of like glass with sand.
Yep. So it's now recontained in something, and it is as safe as anything we could do to dispose of it here on the planet.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Because my concern that if they are trying to target the ocean, those chemicals are like being released in the ocean. But since that's not happening anymore.
Right.
I'm like,
And
okay, it's not
that's
too bad.
Right. That's why they do it this way, is because in theory, anything that actually does make it down to the surface will be fused, will not be. Which is also why when you see meteors or when you see meteorites, meteors that have hit the ground become a meteorite. When you look at a meteorite, they're very typically shiny because of that. They've had that fused, the rock has been fused. It's melted rock that creates that look to it. Same thing with these batteries here like that.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah. So they're trying to work out all the details on it. The total thing was 2.9 tons when it left the space station.
So I was a little wrong.
Yeah. So lots and lots of stuff like that. And it ended up being just a couple of inches big, being able to be measured by inches for that.
Jeez, that must have been huge, and it just shrunk to a tiny little thing.
Yeah, tiny little thing. And think about that with that speed smashing into you. Yeah.
It's crazy. It's like when you bring something from the surface down to the below the ocean, it also shrinks. Similar concept.
Exactly. We have one more final story for you here. And by the way, everybody, as always, we have all the links in the show notes for you, because this story is a long one. Karina, when do you die?
See, based on what I read from this article,
different idea before this story, huh?
I mean, I had a similar idea of what was happening because I read a couple books.
Mm-hmm.
But from what I understand from the article, it's basically saying death is not something that's instant. It's not like you're flipping up a switch. It's a process that you have to constantly it's different things happening. So essentially, if some things are still turned on or still working, like your brain, your organs and all that stuff, essentially you can still be brought back to life. So are you really dead?
Right. And that's part of that is how do you, when you're talking to someone about this, like when did you die? When you're talking to a doctor, it's one thing. When you're talking to the person, it's a different thing. When you're talking in a religious aspect, it's a different thing again. So it really becomes, it has become this really interesting topic. And this is a long read here. This is
It's very interesting too.
Yeah. One of the ones that I wanted to point out about this, about why you want to read this, because it goes into depth on why this is happening now. And it's because we couldn't save people before. So this may very well have been happening for people for all of our history. But when you have a heart attack, which is what's happening, you're going into cardiac arrest, you're having a heart attack, and your blood stops, your heart stops dead. Your brain is still functioning, it's still putting out, various enzymes and various types of chemicals going on in there. People would die, and that would just be it. Now that we have modern resuscitation techniques, where we're able to, someone who has a heart attack, be able to bring them back. It used to be less than 10% back in the 60s could actually be saved in the first place. Not that had these experiences, but if you went into a heart condition, you had a heart attack, go into cardiac arrest, only 10% of those people ever came back. And now we're getting up into 60% or higher. Yeah. So we have a much larger number of people who are coming back from these severe traumatic events.
The one that was interesting was the one that she apparently overdosed and was certified dead for like 6 hours, and they were still able to bring her back. Yeah. And she wasn't the only case. They also talked about another one too.
Mm-hmm. And there's some really good information in here. And by the way, this is not new in any way. I mean, 1740 is when they started documenting some of this stuff. 1909 was the person who tried to actually quantify when your brain stops working. And this is before they were doing full surgeries or anything like that. So people have been working on this for a long time, but it hasn't been until recently, until the 70s, 60s and 70s, when we really started doing this hardcore CPR and stuff like that to bring people back.
Yeah, it was very interesting, and different aspects of it, like how different people perceive death differently. Mm-hmm. It was very interesting.
Yeah, the thing about the rats, did you notice that part in the article? All of the same chemical reactions that are happening to humans are happening in rat brains.
Oh, yes, yes.
And so that brings that, if you bring a rat back, what do their perceptions change? How does that affect them? Because we know if you have any family, relatives, anybody who's gone through that kind of severe trauma like that, it changes them psychologically.
Yes.
Does that do that across all creatures?
Animals, yeah.
Don't know. And the number of this is just going to go bigger and bigger and bigger. The last point I want to give to people out there is that there were only 17 articles about this before 1984. There were 221 in the last 10 years alone. Since 2014 till now, 221 articles detailing this kind of stuff in a scientific study of using various methods to measure chemicals, measure all the different stuff and brain waves and everything. So this is something that people are taking seriously. If you've been listening to us talk and you're like, oh, that's crazy talk, those are those people with past lives thing.
Oh, no, yeah.
This is a serious, real scientific endeavor that they're working on.
Yeah, and I feel like once they finish like their experiments and their studies and all that kind of stuff, we're going to learn so much from their studies.
Yeah, and how the brain actually, what does the brain continue to work on? How does it continue, with beyond oxygen, beyond all those other things? And I just don't think we're ready for this.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like our whole healthcare system. Are they ready to really try and maintain, well, no, wait, the doctors now say you're not dead because...
Oh, I can just see everything happening.
Yeah. Is my health insurance going to cover that? I wonder. Yeah, it's going to be a mess. Tell us what's going on at South Regional. I know you are taking part in the big events next 2 weeks from now on the next week. What am I saying? On the 10th.
Yes, so next week, the Broward County Library's 50th anniversary celebration. We're going to be having cake and refreshments for the public in order to come celebrate the birthday of Broward County Library,
50,
turning 50 years old.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so just stop by with us and at the multipurpose room, and we'll be there.
How many years have you been here?
Oh, geez, depends. Technically, I've been here 5 years.
Good. Really good. That's not a bad thing. Over 10% of the time the library's been around, Karina's been here. That is excellent.
Yes.
We're not going to talk about me. If there is a person out there that you want to see featured on the show, or a library you'd like to see featured on the show one week, reach out. creationstation@broward.org. And we'll see everybody next week. Have a great time, everyone.